We ain't gonna let nobody turn us around.
Good evening, brothers and sisters, and we welcome you to another opportunity to share with us for our midweek worship experience. It is my prayer and sincere hope and desire that you've been blessed by this day tremendously, and certainly we want to welcome all of you that are sharing with us on this evening. Tonight is a very special midweek experience for us. For those of you who was with us on Sunday, you remember that Sunday was Justice Sunday. And this week is Legislative Week. On Monday night, we were able to gather and have conversations with our Fairfax County supervisors. And tonight we have a very special guest as well. I want to just say a word about this Justice and Legislative Week. The past few years, we've been gathering instead of what would have been our Super Bowl Sunday. We have been attempting to be proactive and to help individuals engage in conversation with our elected officials about policies that impact our lives. This began several years ago because we decided that we were going to take a stand with Colin Kaepernick when he took that knee. We as a congregation took the knee with him and decided that we were going to use this particular season again to help bring attention and to bring light to issues that impact us, and particularly Black and brown people around our nation. I want you to do me a favor tonight. I want you to share this broadcast, to invite others to join in this conversation with us as well. And do note that we are sharing tonight via our website, as well as, of course, Facebook Live, and of course on YouTube. I also want you to participate in this conversation by asking questions that are on your heart and mind as they come to your attention, and we'll do our very best to answer those questions tonight as we gather. Would you join me in the word of prayer as we center ourselves on this Lord's Day? Gracious and eternal God, our Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for another opportunity to gather in this sacred space. We ask God your blessings upon our time. We ask God your blessings upon all of our elected officials, and particularly our special guests on this evening. And we ask God that you would anoint us afresh, that we will be soldiers to do the work that you've called us to do. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Again, thank you for being with us tonight. It is my delight and honor to present and to introduce our very special guest for this particular conversation tonight, and that is the Commonwealth Attorney of Fairfax County, my friend and brother, Steve Descano. Let's show some hearts and likes for our Commonwealth Attorney, Steve Descano, and we want to thank you, Steve, for being with us tonight. Please tell me what is the formal title? How do you address the Commonwealth Attorney?
Well, Pastor Walton, thank you for having me, and I will tell you that some people call me the Commonwealth Attorney Descano. Some people call me Honorable Steve Descano, but since you and I go back a long ways, you can just call me Steve, buddy.
Well, listen, we want to certainly respect the office, and certainly you have earned the right to be there. And yes, we indeed have known you for quite some time, but tonight you're representing us, and we want you to know that we are very excited to have you with us tonight. Steve, I want to just begin our conversation tonight by asking, how are you doing, first of all?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. It has been like everybody else. COVID has been a very, very weird time, but myself and my family and the people that I work with, we're persevering and we're continuing on with the mission. So we're keeping a good attitude about it, and I imagine just from talking to you that you are doing the same.
Yes, well, we are coping, but coping well. And some days are better than others, but we're really, really grateful just to be alive, to be well. And certainly to have the use of technology to keep us connected. Steve, I want to just say this so that our audience knows this. You know, when I first met you, I met you in your capacity with the Fairfax County NAACP. So can you just tell us a little bit about who Steve Descano is, and then the journey to get to the position of the Commonwealth attorney before we dive into our conversation?
I would be happy to. And it is funny that you mentioned when we first met, when I was doing criminal justice reform work with the local NAACP. And also I was, at the same time, if you recall, I was working to get the county's police civilian review panel, of which I was representing the NAACP, trying to get that.
You were actually a member of the review panel.
That's right. I was.
Yeah,
I was actually very happy.
Yes.
I was very happy. I was actually nominated by the NAACP. And that kind of leads into why I have this job now, right? It's I had been a federal prosecutor before, and had gotten into that world with the idea that the criminal justice system is one that treats everybody fairly and treats everybody equally, regardless of who they are, how much money they have, the color of their skin, where they come from. And it did not take me very, very long into my career as a prosecutor to realize, unfortunately, that's simply not the case.
Wow.
I would see it in court every day. When I was watching people get sentenced, I could almost predict if someone was going to get a lighter sentence or a harsher sentence based on how nice their clothes were, or based on what color of skin they had. And that's what really brought me to get involved with the NAACP and the county's police civilian review panel, because I had done that on the federal side for years, traveling all around this country and seeing it in different jurisdictions. But then I started to see a little bit of that, systemic issues in the county we live in. And that really, really bothered me. And the more I got into it, the more I just realized the criminal justice system needs a systemic change. The Commonwealth's attorney, in most cases, it's called the district attorney. It's the leader of the criminal justice system. It would be a great perch to bring the needed reform to, and that's why I ran for the office, because I wanted to reorient what the criminal justice system was. I wanted to reorient how the Office of Prosecution looked at its job, not as a function of being harsh and putting people in jail forever and ever, but a place where equity and equality and fairness is really the watchwords, and trying to get at the root causes of issues and trying to help our community and make our community safe through actual long-term reform. So,
Steve, if I'm hearing you correctly, you were obviously an attorney, but you sitting in court, you could literally identify and take, some guess, if you will, how these court cases were going to go based on how individuals would dress, their ethnicity. And so you decided that you needed to do something about this. So you were this ordinary citizen who saw a need and decided that you were going to engage in the process. And as a result, here you are, so many years later, now serving as a Commonwealth's attorney for Fairfax County.
That's 100% right.
If nothing else, we can stop the conversation right there, because somebody who is listening, should realize that they too can make a difference. And whether they had intentions of running for office or serving on some board or commission, it is possible to actually see a need, want to do something about it, and become positioned to make a difference.
That's absolutely correct. And I would say that That is actually, in my opinion, and I think in a lot of people's experience, when you get the best of someone, when you get somebody who gets into it for the right reasons, has that passion, and really wants to bring change, those are the change makers. And I always encourage anybody who's thinking about seeing a need and wanting to make change to just jump into it, because once you get into it and you start working, you never know where you find yourself, where you find yourself ending up.
Wow. Well, let me stop here and encourage members in our audience that are watching tonight. We certainly want to hear from you. As questions, come to your mind, your heart, please drop them in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer your questions tonight. So, Steve, let me start by asking this also. There are people who are watching who they've heard of the Attorney General of the state of Virginia, but they may not be 100% sure of the role that the Commonwealth attorney plays locally. Can you tell us a little bit about, in layman's terms, what is the role and function of your office, and so that we can make the connection of how important this role is, in particular, to criminal justice reform? Yes.
That's a great question, because I'm going to be very honest. Virginia makes it very difficult because they call it a Commonwealth's attorney, where most places don't call it that. They call it either a district attorney or a state's attorney.
Okay.
So essentially, the Commonwealth's attorney is the elected prosecutor. And what that means in reality is that, the elected prosecutor is the leader of the criminal justice system. The policies and the procedures set in that office dictate how things are handled in the criminal justice system. I tell people all the time, a police officer can bring somebody to the courthouse door. Prosecutor is the one who determines whether they walk through that front door, how they're going to be treated, how their case is going to be decided, if it's going to be pled, what the offers are going to be, what the sentences are going to be sought, if they're going to be diverted. And quite frankly, even at the back end, the judges are important, but the prosecutors really set the table. So in a lot of ways, your prosecutor, your elected Commonwealth, is the individual who has the most ability, if they want to reform your local criminal justice system.
Wow. That's a powerful role. That's a powerful role. So a person is arrested, but what happens after that arrest as relates to prosecution largely depends on what your office does.
That's 100% correct.
Okay.
And quite frankly, I also mentioned that, depending on how we deal with cases, obviously our law enforcement partners, they're independent, but the type of cases that they bring and the evidence that they seek out, essentially, in a lot of ways we can influence that by basically how we determine the cases that they bring to us. So while we don't have direct power over the other actors, such as police or what have you, are the way that we handle our cases, because we're the nexus through which everything flows, is really, really important to the entire system.
Well, let's jump in then to some real conversation.
Sure.
This past summer, there were lots of protests, and the protests were the result of, a lot of inequality, a lot of disparities that people saw in certain parts of our country, and it just really all came to a head. Mm-hmm. George Floyd, in particular, comes to my mind tonight. And particularly the killing of George Floyd, which led to a lot of the more recent protests this past summer. Can you tell me, Steve, first of all, what were your thoughts watching those events play out on national TV, and then your thoughts about the prosecution or the lack thereof, or the arrests, or what were thoughts that came to your mind, knowing that potentially this could very well happen under your watch?
Yeah, I will say a lot of thoughts flooded my mind as all this happened. Of course, my initial thoughts were for the family of Mr. Floyd and the tragedy that they were experiencing. But beyond that, what I thought was, this is something, as someone who has been in the criminal justice system around this country for a long time, I know that happens. And I know that what happened there is not necessarily a one-off event. It is a tragedy or an issue that is repeated over and over again in our country, and whether it leads to that level of tragedy or not, I always understood that level of disparity was in our criminal justice system, and our criminal justice system, how it's dangerous. It's more dangerous for some people than others. And what I thought when I saw the protest erupt from that, I'll be very, very honest. I was very, very happy that people were taken to the streets and having their voices heard, because for too long, that conversation was only being had by reform-minded criminal justice professionals, or individuals who have personally experienced that. And it was this groundswell that you could see coming if you were paying attention, and to actually see people really key on this issue, and to really understand how destructive it is, and how it colors our communities, and to actually not only go to the streets, but want to change this and put their energy behind reforms that will make this better. I was actually incredibly pleased and incredibly proud.
So you saw this as a great awakening to some degree.
It was a great awakening. You put it better than I ever could. And it is a great awakening. And to me, my biggest concern is that we have to harness this energy and continue to fight for the reforms that we need, not just take half measures, but actually get to the criminal justice system that I think everyone watching this really, really wants. And that's one that is fair, is equal, treats everyone with equity, and isn't a mass incarceration machine, actually helps keep our community safe, and actually helps build up our communities instead of breaking them down.
Great. So Steve, having said that, and let me ask you this. Again, as I said, this very well could have been, on your watch, right? So what initiatives or what new initiatives have you taken to prevent such an event from happening here?
Well, that is a great question, because, this was something that has always been on my mind since I took this office. And quite frankly, since I was on the Police Civilian Review panel. It's one of the knowledge that this could happen is one of the reasons why I was on that panel. But for particularly these types of incidents, not talking about the system generally, but these particular types of incidents, I can tell you that one of the things that we've done in my office, I'm sure you're aware, Pastor Walton, that there are officers have body cams now, lots of body cams on the street. And part of your prosecutor's role is to review that body cam for evidence when you're presenting your case.
Right.
What I've done is I created a policy I've directed in my office that when my prosecutors watch that video, if they see anything that is a use of force, looks like a use of force, or is a violation of police department regulations, that they report it up to my office, and I have a deputy in my office whose job is to report that for further investigation, whether that be internal affairs investigation or criminal investigation.
Wow.
I'll also say that
that's a new initiative.
That's a new initiative
prior to your arrival.
Absolutely not. That is a new initiative that we put in place because, as I said, the leader of the criminal justice system, the independent check in the criminal justice system is in my office. And while we may work with our law enforcement partners, we don't work. That doesn't mean that we would cover up anything that occurs. And I'll say that the other thing that goes along with that, and I can't talk too much about them because they are live cases, but I would hope that some of my actions over the last year of, when necessary, indicting law enforcement professionals for what a grand jury would find is a potential violation of the law is something that I have not shied away from. Because at the end of the day, my job is to be the people's lawyer, to work for the community, and that means holding everybody accountable regardless of what their position is.
Well, I will say this: you can't talk about live cases, but I can refer to cases that have been in the newspaper, and there have been plenty of instances where you have been quick to take very strong positions where needed. So let me also ask this, because we talked about this great awakening. So what role do you think also that civilians play in police accountability? I think
quite frankly, that's where the power of this great awakening is. And quite frankly, without the power of the people, even an elected official like myself, we would have no backing. So the people are incredibly important, and important amongst in a couple of different ways. The first one is advocating, whether that's advocating at the legislature or advocating to your local board of supervisors. I've always been a proponent of the idea that good policing, good criminal justice is what the community says it is. It is not what a police chief or a Commonwealth's attorney or an academic professional is. It is whether the values of the community are reflected in that criminal justice system. Right. That is the linchpin. So getting out there and advocating and letting people know what your values are and what you want to see, that's job number one. The second thing is get involved in things like the civilian review panel. That work, that day in, day out work, actually reviewing internal affairs investigations, for example, in the civilian review panel, is incredibly powerful. And I think that it would be a mistake for people to just let that be seen as window dressing. I think there's an opportunity for people to jump in and build some teeth into that.
So let's talk a little bit more about the civilian review panel. You were part of the team on the NAACP at the time that really fought for the creation of this panel. The panel was created. There's been lots of conversation. You actually sat on the panel. There have been lots of conversations about the authority of the panel. But just recently, there's been some state legislation that gives the panels more authority. But that authority comes from the local municipalities. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So would you support the implementation of greater authority of the civilian police panel to investigate or to have more teeth, if you will?
I think adding more teeth to a civilian review panel is a positive thing.
Okay.
I will tell you that as part of being on the civilian review panel, I studied and we compared ourselves with other jurisdictions. And what you see when you do that is that civilian review panels that have teeth, that have dedicated staff, that have the ability to do certain things are more successful. And really one of the reasons why they're more successful is because you get greater community buy-in. Because the more that you can show that the civilian review panel can do certain things, the more people in that community really start to value that civilian review panel as part of their oversight and part of their government. So the more increasing authority for a civilian review panel is generally a good, and I think that would be a positive thing.
Great. So, Steve, there might be individuals watching who don't know what they should do if they encounter, and by no means am I suggesting that all police officers are bad, but if there's somebody who's watching, if there's a parent who's watching or a person who's watching and they have a bad encounter with a police officer, what should that individual do?
Well, I think, well, first of all, I would say that I agree with you, right? We can have this conversation, which we're having, and nobody should take it as either one of us saying that all police officers are bad.
Right.
And I think that it's unfortunate that sometimes when people want to have this honest conversation, that naysayers in bad faith will hurl stones and say that, well, those people are officer haters.
Right.
That's simply not the case. I will tell you that in the instance if someone feels that they have not been treated fairly by a police officer, they can do a few things. I will say that they can contact their local station and ask to be patched into internal affairs. Our internal affairs in the county police department is a very professionalized force, and in my experience, the investigations that I've received for them have been very thorough and fair. I will also tell you that is probably the best thing that they can do, and they should. I would also recommend that they act as quickly as possible in making that call. The reason being, as we said, there is a lot of body cam footage. There's a lot of in-cruiser video footage, and we want to make sure that that footage becomes part of any investigation. So that is really what I would think the number one thing to do is, and I can understand why people might be afraid to do that, but I can assure you that those types of complaints go through a separate chain, and there won't be any repercussions.
Well, let me also say this in the spirit of, not all police officers are bad. And I know that your office and certainly the chief's office is probably inundated with bad experiences. But I think it was last year sometime, I was pulled over for speeding, and the officer was extremely kind. We disagreed on the fact that I was speeding, but he was very polite as he issued the ticket. And I had to literally call I sent the chief an email to just simply to say it was the nicest encounter that I've had, although I didn't agree with his assessment, but it was a nice encounter. But seriously, so what you would suggest is people not wait, but to contact their local precinct and internal affairs departments as quick as possible to preserve the integrity of the footage.
That's right. And should there be any confusion or any confusion as to where to go, I would tell people that they can also reach out to my office, the Office of the Commonwealth's Attorney, and we can help direct them in the right way to get those to get any complaint filed or investigation, if necessary, started.
Okay, great. Remember, if you're watching tonight in the audience, we're welcome. We're open to receiving your questions. Please type them in the chat, and we will certainly do our best to answer them. So let's talk about this issue of cash bail. This has been a hot issue recently, and one of the areas where there's been questions about equity. Because the truth of the matter is, if you have access to resources and you commit a crime, you can, pay your money and get walking real fast. So people may not understand why this was such a big issue for some, Steve, but you were very progressive on this issue. Can you tell us about the success you've had with cash bail? Sure,
I would love to, because it is a big issue. And for those people watching who don't know what cash bail is, essentially, cash bail is the amount of money a judge would make someone they've already determined to not be a danger to the community. So we're talking about people who are not dangerous to the community. That the amount of money a judge would make that person pay so that they can await their trial at home. And if they can't pay it, they would stay for months in jail while they await their trial. Now, there's two major problems with that. The first is it creates a two-tiered system of justice, one for the rich and one for everybody else. And I can tell you that everybody else happens to be predominantly Black and brown. So you have an equity issue. You have issues of people being jailed simply because they're poor, not because they're dangerous, but because they're poor. And I will tell you, the amount of money someone has doesn't have anything to do with how safe they are. Right. No amount of money is going to make a dangerous person safe, just like no amount of poverty is going to make a safe person dangerous. So you have that equity issue. The other thing is, study after study after study has shown that even just a day or two in jail pretrial because you can't afford bail increases your recidivism rate years down the road exponentially. So holding people because they're poor actually creates more crime years down the road, makes us less safe. And if you think about it, it's easy to understand because that's a person who they may not have savings, but they're working their job. Well, they don't have vacation days, so they lose their job. And then quickly they lose their job. They can't afford their rent. They're going to lose their rent. And my God, if they have kids, they're going to lose their kids. So their life spirals out of control even just in a couple of days. So getting rid of cash bail, it is an equity issue, but it also makes our community more safe. And that's why since the day one of my administration, I have refused to ask for cash bail. I've had my prosecutors take the position that if a person is not a danger to the community, that we want them at home, working their job, living with their family, raising their kids, and we hook them up with services and interventions that can help them get at the root causes of their issues. By the same token, if someone is dangerous, that person is somebody we want to stay in jail until their trial, and no amount of money is going to make us feel comfortable. Right. So what we've done is we've taken that stance. That has, quite frankly, dropped the percentage of people in our jail by double-digit percent. At one point, we reduced the jail population by over 40%. And most of that was people who were in jail because they were poor. And I will tell you, this has real-life consequences, Pastor Walton. I don't know if you saw this story coming out of Houston a few days ago, where a young man, he was caught shoplifting food. And he was in jail because he could not afford a $100 bail. And he was in jail for months, and he caught COVID and he died. because he was too poor to afford food and he was too poor to afford cash bail. He died because of cash bail. And that simply is injustice in what should be our justice system.
Too poor to afford food and
Mm-hmm.
too poor to afford cash bail.
Yeah. And it is, and I will say that in jurisdictions that have cash bail, that rely on cash bail, that story is all too common. It may not result in the same tragic end, but I will tell you, when I came into office, one of the first things that I did is my team and I re-reviewed the case history of all 750 plus people in the Fairfax jail. And the amount of people that we found that were in there simply because they could not afford a few $100s bail was astounding. And we actually worked to get those people out on recognizance bonds and hook them up with services while they're on the outside, because it's the right thing to do and it makes our community safer.
Wow. Thank you for that. There's a question that has come. What is the attorney Descano's jurisdiction? Yes, it is only Fairfax County. Am I correct?
It is only Fairfax County, but I will tell you that what we do in Fairfax, we lead the state. We drag the state along with us. And not only do we drag the state along with us, but I've actually I formed a group with some of my other progressive Commonwealth attorneys around the state. There's only 12 of us, but we represent over 40% of the state's population. And what we do is over the last 2 sessions, we've effectively lobbied the General Assembly for a number of criminal justice reform matters to be enshrined in the state law. And we've been very successful at the special session over the summer. It looks like we're going to be very successful again now. Some of the things that we've lobbied on are getting rid of mandatory minimum sentences, getting rid of the death penalty, you're getting rid of third strike laws.
Right.
So we're setting the example in Fairfax, but I'm not just doing that. We're actually taking our successes to Richmond, showing them that it can work, and trying to get them, our delegates and senators, to enshrine those things into state law.
So just so we're clear, neighboring jurisdictions such as Loudoun County, Prince William County, they would have separate Commonwealth attorneys. Those
jurisdictions all have separate Commonwealth attorneys.
Okay.
So I handle Fairfax County and the city of Fairfax.
Okay. All right. Great. So thank you. Here's another question. What is your position on uniformed police officers in schools?
That's a great question. During my work on the NAACP, one of the things that we really tried to address was the school to prison pipeline. And that is a massive problem because it takes predominantly young Black children and puts them into the criminal justice system where they shouldn't be. And, that is something that I helped work on with the president of the NAACP at the time. The NAACP worked to change the memorandum of understanding to limit the officer's responsibilities in school, which was a great success. But I think that we can go further. I do think that uniform officers in school could be a tremendous problem. And I think that would be something that I would want to look at. And because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do, I know what we're doing in my office, is we're trying to treat kids like kids. We realize that people's brains are still developing until they're their mid-20s. And we know that putting a kid into the criminal justice system, especially the adult criminal justice system, that ruins that kid's life. There's really no chance for that kid anymore. And we want to get away from that. So, and addressing those uniformed police officers in school, addressing that, I think, would be a big step towards making sure that we're not criminalizing our youth and ruining their lives.
In that same vein, Commonwealth attorney, let me ask you this: young people make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes could have, lifetime consequences. So, talk to us about the power of expungement and what your office is doing about expungement.
Yeah, expungement is very, very important. It's important to me personally. I've heard from a number of individuals, story after story. I just recently had a conversation with a mother whose son was arrested for having half a pill of Adderall. And he was a young person, but he had that on his record, and he's gone on and continued to achieve. But he got his dream job, or he thought he got his dream job, working with underprivileged kids. But when they did the background check on him, they saw this from years ago, and he lost that job. And then he lost the next one that he got for that same reason. So having this record that follows you around for the rest of your life, it keeps you from getting jobs, keeps you from getting education. It can even keep you from getting an apartment. So it's incredibly important. And I will tell you that what we've done is we've been working with the General Assembly to get an expungement bill passed. My view is that it should be free and automatic. The idea being that it shouldn't just be for the wealthy and well-connected who can afford a lawyer that can get their record expunged. It should be for everybody. And not only are we doing that at the legislature, we're trying to get that passed. But when we are doing our plea negotiations, our diversion programs up in Fairfax County, what we have now is starting in March, we will have the ability to defer disposition and do it in a way that allows that incident to be completely expunged from someone's records. And I've directed my prosecutors that when they make those type of dispositions and those type of agreements, that they must do it in a way that allows individuals to have those records expunged.
Wow. Steve, how long have you been in office, and how long is your term?
I've been in office for 13 months. So I took over in January 2020, and my term is 4 years. So I will be on the ballot again in 2023.
And you followed somebody who was there for how long?
Oh my goodness. The gentleman that I ousted in the primary, he was there for 12 years, and he was the handpicked successor of his boss, who had been there for decades. So before me, I believe there had only been 2 Commonwealth attorneys in almost 50 years.
Wow. So it's a 4-year term. And so every 4 years, you have to demonstrate that you've been accountable to the people by being on the ballot. That's
right. And I will say that, some people who have this job before me or in other jurisdictions, for whatever reason, they don't think that they're accountable to the people, or they don't think that they should open their office and let the people know what they're doing. I take the complete opposite approach. I know every single day that I work for the people, and that every single person that is listening to me talk right now is my boss. And if you asked any one of my prosecutors what their job was, I would think that they would get it by now, and they would say, our job is to bring the values of the community into the courthouse. And that is the culture of the office that we are bringing, because I was put here to do that, to bring reform that the community wants, and that's what we do every day.
So you are talking a lot about community and being responsive to the community. Justice Advisory Council, that's another initiative of yours.
It is. It's one I'm really, really proud of and really excited for, because we just had our first meeting last week. Now, the Justice Advisory Council is a council of individuals in the community that have diverse backgrounds. They live in diverse in all areas of the county, and they bring a lot of different perspectives. And their role is essentially, it's a two-way street. I want them to know what we're doing so they can go back to their communities and let them know what their Commonwealth Attorney's Office is doing. But I also want to hear from them. I want to hear where the gaps are. What are the issues them and their neighbors are seeing? Because at the end of the day, I have to be responsive to that. It's my job. So I want to know what's going on in every corner of Fairfax County. And I want to know how we can be helpful to every individual, to every localized concern. So that Justice Advisory Council is yet another way in which we're trying to bring the values of the court, or the values of the community, into the courthouse. And quite frankly, it's going to be so important, because I've always said from day one, the first time you meet me shouldn't be in a courtroom, and the first time you hear about what we do in this office shouldn't be in a courtroom. I want every person in Fairfax County to have very strong opinions about the things that we're doing, because at the end of the day, we're trying to be a reflection of that community.
Wow, that's great. We have a question here. I've lost confidence in the justice system in light of the impeachment process and other court cases. In the court system, our elected officials, as well as juries, see the evidence and do not look at it equitably. How can an ordinary citizen ever expect to get a fair trial? This unfairness is historic in the Black community. Wow.
Yeah, that is a wow question, and I will say, Teresa, I believe, who asked the question. All I can say is it is historic in the Black community. I understand why you feel that way, and I think, quite frankly, you're not wrong to feel that way. All I can say is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to reform it. We're trying to make it better. That's why we work every single day, and that's why we're being so open about what we do. My job is to build that fair and equitable justice system that you have confidence in. So my hope for you and for people who are similarly skeptical is to engage with my office, engage with the civilian review panel, engage with the community, and also watch what we're doing. I very much take pride in not only walking the walk, but talking the talk. And I know it's probably going to take a long bit of walking the walk to convince you, but I'm willing to walk that walk. So please just continue to watch what we're doing. And my hope is that as you see us bring more reform, as you see us not only bring reform, but do so in a way that specifically centers the Black community and Black experience and communities of color who have been traditionally shut out or treated unfairly by our criminal justice system, that the more and more you see that, the more and more you can have confidence in it. And that is my hope.
Wow. What are the most challenging aspects of serving as a Commonwealth attorney who supports progressive policies? There must be some tension there.
Pastor Walton, there is some tension there.
Great.
And I will tell you that the most challenging aspect is very similar to any time somebody tries to change a system. The old saying goes, if you want to make an enemy, try to change something. And I will tell you that there are a number of actors, not that the individuals are bad people,
right,
but institutions just have an inertia to them.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody like myself comes in with a reform agenda, and quite frankly, it's very, very aggressive about it, like extremely aggressive about it, institutions fight back. They dig in their heels. And that has been the greatest fight. There were people, quite frankly, inside the office that had that mentality. They don't work in the office anymore. There are fights that we've had both inside and outside the courthouse. We've had those fights. I think I feel pretty good that we've come out on top of those fights. But at the end of the day, people don't like change. Institutions don't like change. Wow. And that is the day in, day out grind of it. But I'm a grinder. We're here to do it. And every day we move the ball forward just a little bit more.
That's great. Let me ask you this. What keeps you awake at night as a Commonwealth attorney?
The thing that keeps me awake at night is that, my goal is to change the system and treat everybody fairly so that everybody gets a fair shake, no matter who they are, where they live, color of their skin, how much money they have. The thing that keeps me awake at night is that somebody's going to fall through the cracks. That is the thing that it keeps me awake at night. It's the fuel that burns me, that I rely on to burn my engine, to make sure that we build a system that nobody falls through the cracks, where everybody gets treated fairly, where everybody feels heard, and everybody gets justice. My fear is that somebody will slip through the cracks, and that's what we fight against every day, to build something where nobody will slip through.
Your passion comes through. What standards are your prosecutors held to when deciding on prosecuting police officers? And is there any review of their decision?
It's a great question. I would say that without doubt, probably the most important decision that my office makes is whether or not to charge a police officer with a crime.
Wow.
It's incredibly important. It's the most important. Not only is it the most visible, but I think it is the most visceral to large parts of our community. Quite frankly, because I think large parts of our community, and in most communities for years, have seen things that look like obvious crimes get swept under the rug because someone has a badge. And because they're so important, what I will tell you, Pastor Walton, and tell everybody here is, I make all those decisions. The buck stops here. Every single one of those decisions, whether to charge an officer or not charge an officer, I work with my team of deputies. I bring in the best and brightest to work with me on those. But at the end of the day, that decision is mine. You will never hear me say, well, I disagree with that decision, or no, that is my decision. I've been elected to make the hard decisions, and I do not shy away from them.
I can imagine that cannot be easy.
It is not, but it's a truism, I think, for a good elected official. You don't forge yourself in the fire easy decisions. It is the hard decisions that shows your worth to the community. And that's why I take them so seriously, because I know each and every one of those decisions is an opportunity to show the community, and in many cases the world writ large, that the criminal justice system in Fairfax County is fair and will get to the right result and will hold people accountable regardless of who they are.
Wow. So if you had to talk, well, obviously you're talking to the audience, but if you had to list your top 3 major accomplishments thus far, what would those 3 be?
Oh my goodness. I would say cash bail policy, and basically essentially no longer relying on cash bail was a huge win for us. Right. It was a sea change in the way our criminal justice system functioned, and it had a direct result in the number of individuals who were held in jail. We were able to make our community more equitable while keeping it safe. I would say the next biggest thing that I'm proud of is that Justice Advisory Council. It is, in many ways, it is opening the criminal justice system and prosecutor's office to the community in a way that I don't think any other prosecutor's office is open. And it really shows our commitment to being the people's lawyer.
Let me ask you, I don't want to cut you off, but are all of the seats filled on that advisory council? Or if a person wants to serve, how can they get in the pipeline to serve?
If they want to serve, and I encourage people to reach out, if you go to the Commonwealth Attorney's website, on the front page, there's a link for apply to be a member of the Justice Advisory Council. Okay. So I would encourage you to do that, and we want good people on our council. If you have an interest or passion for this, and you can bring some work to the table, we want you to be a part of what we're building. And I'll say, Pastor,
I cut you off on the third one. Yeah.
No, the third one we haven't talked about, and that's why I want to make sure I get to it, because it's really, really important to me. We just put out this policy in December, and it is in many ways a culmination of a lot of things. I like to refer to it as our anti-mass incarceration policy. Mass incarceration is a thing that we are fighting against. Mass incarceration, it sprouts from many, many different avenues. So we're attacking it from many different avenues. We're doing things like no longer relying on mandatory minimums in our plea agreements. Prosecutors in the state are given the power to unilaterally charge kids as adults almost whenever we want. I've taken that power away from prosecutors in my office. I want to treat our kids like kids and keep them out of that criminal justice pipeline. We've ended the death penalty. We've done a number of things in an anti-mass incarceration policy. We're increasing diversion as part of that. It is really something that is a big step on that path to really reforming our criminal justice system into something that is all about building up our community instead of breaking it down.
So when you talk about diversion programs, you're really talking about alternative ways to keep people out of jail.
Absolutely. My view is, most people who become involved in the criminal justice system have a root cause there. And if we can get at the root cause and help that individual, they will go back into their community better than when they came into the criminal justice system, be more productive, and build up their community and not recidivate. Whereas if you just take somebody and say, well, that guy's a criminal, we're going to throw him in jail, they're coming back to that community. And they're going to go back to that community worse than when they came in, and they're going to have less opportunity. Their community is going to be less safe for it, and they're just going to recycle in and cycle out. We're trying to break that. So yeah, diversion is all about helping people get at the root causes and keeping them out of that cycle in our criminal justice system.
Wow. Here's last question I'll take from the audience tonight. Would you consider allowing young people the opportunity to come to your office and meet with you and some of your prosecutors for an information sharing session?
I would love to do that. Nothing would make me happier. And I will tell you that if it wasn't for COVID, I would have my prosecutors and myself, we would be going out more and more. You'd be seeing us in the community. But I would love to do that. So whoever wrote that question, if you have a group of people who you want, young people who you want to come in and talk with us, please reach out to my office, and I promise you, I'll have my deputy chief of staff schedule that meeting, because I'd love to bring young people into the office and let them see what we're doing.
While we're at it, can I go just a step further? Are there opportunities to intern in your office, whether they're paid or not? If there are young people who are interested in a career in law enforcement or law, going to law school, are there opportunities for internships in your office?
I would say there are opportunities for internship in the office right now with COVID. We are limiting them to law school students only because we're in court every day. We really have never taken a break from COVID.
Wow.
So we are in the office, and I want to be mindful and safe for young people. But we'll be taking in some law students. But once we're past this pandemic, I would love, and we'll have many opportunities for young people at all levels who are interested to come in, because I will tell you, I want young people to be involved to be interested in this career, to be interested in law, to be interested to understand how this field can really further positive change in communities. So I think that would be a wonderful thing, and I would welcome that, to have people come in and intern.
Well, Steve, I really cannot thank you enough for your time tonight, and for the passion in which you have shared, and for your progressive agenda. We really greatly appreciate you being with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it firsthand, directly from our Commonwealth's attorney's mouth himself, Steve Descano. And again, we look forward to the opportunity when you can return to worship at First Baptist, and so that we can certainly, pray with you and continue to pray for you. But you know that we're doing that on a regular and consistent basis. Any parting words that you'd like to leave with us tonight?
Well, first of all, Pastor Walton, thank you for having me. And I will tell you, the number of occasions that I have come and worship at the church have been great. I can't wait to get back in and see everybody in the community again. As for parting words, I would just like everybody in the audience to know, probably for the first time, maybe ever, in your prosecutor's office, you have a group of prosecutors who are really focused on bringing the values of the community into the courthouse. We're working for you every day. We want to build that fair and equitable justice system that you want. And we're also open to talking and to listening. So if you have issues, know that we're working for you. Contact our office, and we'll take your conversation. We'll take that seriously. Wow.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm sure on behalf of all of those that are watching, all of those who will watch, we are greatly pleased to know that we're in good hands. As you can see, individuals are likewise sharing their appreciation for your time tonight. And again, we look forward to connecting you with our young people, and so that they can engage on a more personal level. And we look forward to a post-COVID experience when we can all be together to worship and just enjoy the fellowship of one another. Until then, I look forward to seeing you real soon. And to those of you who are watching, please don't forget, before I say that, let's show some hearts and appreciation to Steve Descano for being with us tonight. And I want to encourage and invite you back with us tomorrow evening. Tomorrow we will have members from the Fairfax County Board of Education. And certainly that will be a robust conversation as well. And so parents, we want to encourage you to be a part of this. I'm sure you have some questions about our students' return to school, or whether or not we're going to remain in the same place for the rest of the year. However, we'll save that for tomorrow night. Steve, thank you very much. Be blessed, everybody. Have a great night, and I'll see you on tomorrow.